The human's master bought a rare alien slave. Only the human learned her dangerous secret steam clung to the air in thick, damp sheets, turning every breath into a shallow pool of heat. Gaiman knelt on the marble floor of the eastern bath hall, his hands working a stiff-bristled brush in rhythmic arcs across the ornate tiles. The water cascading from the lion-headed spouts above scalded his back and shoulders until the skin there glowed red. But he didn't flinch. Pain had long ago become part of the background, like the dull weight of the slave collar at his throat, a ring of cold metal threaded with explosives and obedience. Sweat mixed with condensation, tracing rivulets down the lines of muscle his years of labor had carved. His reflection wavered in the water, pooling at his knees, a gaunt face, stubble shadowing the jaw, eyes that scanned without seeming to, always watching, always thinking. 3 years had passed since the raiders had swarmed his cargo vessel in the dark of the outer lanes. 3 years since the stun batons, the iron cages, the exchange of credits he hadn't even been conscious to see. They'd sold him here, to Mornax, the gray-blue four-eyed proprietor of this temple to decadence and cruelty. The bathhouse was a palace for the galaxy's most powerful criminals. Marble pools filled with mineral steam, private suites for indulgence and negotiation, and enough guards to crush a prison riot before it began. Damon had mapped every inch of it in his mind. From the far end of the hall, the sound of heavy boots echoed, followed by the chittering laugh of some visiting crime lord. Business was brisk today. Whispers slid through the steam something about a new acquisition from the Proxima Station auction. Special, someone said. Rare. Damon kept his head down, scrubbing the swirl pattern in the tiles until the gold inlay gleamed. The main doors hissed open. Mornax entered, tall and skeletal under flowing silks, 4 eyes narrowing with satisfaction. 2 guards followed, dragging a figure between them. Damon's brush stilled. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in the steam, a soft turquoise glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her breath. Silvery hair tumbled loose around her shoulders, the strands catching the light like threads of spun metal. A torn sand-colored dress clung to her slender frame, its single strap fallen to bare one shoulder. Shackles of black metal circled her wrists and neck, each etched with faintly glowing glyphs. But it was her eyes that froze him, deep violet, locking on his for the briefest heartbeat. They weren't the dull, hollow eyes of someone broken. They were alive, calculating, measuring him as if she were cataloging every detail. This one cost me a fortune, Mornax announced, yanking the chain at her throat so she stumbled forward. A Lumidian female, perfect for my collection. The Cygnus Syndicate lords lounging nearby laughed and muttered their approval. Human, Mornax said sharply. Show her to preparation. Get her cleaned and dressed. Damon rose without comment, crossing the slick floor. He took the chain from Mornax, his calloused fingers brushing hers. The contact was quick, almost accidental, until he felt the tiny press of something into his palm. Hard, smooth, deliberate. He didn't look at her, didn't break stride, leading her from the hall into the quieter service corridor. Only when the steam-thick air thinned did he open, his hand enough to glimpse the glint of a data chip, no larger than his thumbnail. Who are you? He murmured, his voice low enough that it was swallowed by the hiss of distant pipes. Her lips barely moved. Someone who can help you escape this place. If you help me first. His steps slowed, suspicion and the faintest flicker of hope twisting in his chest. The collars. I know about them, she cut in softly. That chip has the override codes. But it's no good without access to Mornax's console. They rounded a corner, the slave quarters just ahead. Damon forced his grip tight around the chain, making it look like a tug. Anyone watching would see nothing but a handler leading a new acquisition. But under the burn of the collar and the sting of the steam, A new current moved in his blood. He hadn't felt it in years. Hope got the preparation chamber. Smelled of sterilizing agents and perfumed oils, a stark contrast to the mineral tang of the bath halls. Soft light glowed from recessed panels in the ceiling, casting the place in an almost clinical haze. Damon ushered her inside, the clink of her shackles echoing off the polished walls. A pair of attendants, a squat insectoid and a tall bird-like humanoid, were busy laying out folded garments and trays of grooming tools. They glanced up as Damon entered, but returned quickly to their work. The rules here were clear. Don't interfere with Mornax's orders. Don't ask questions. Don't get curious about new arrivals. He locked the door behind them, as procedure dictated. The faint click sounded louder than it should have. She turned. To him, then, the chain slacked between them. Up close, the strange shimmer beneath her skin was more pronounced. Not a trick of the steam, but something innate bioluminescence threaded through her very cells. "You didn't answer me," he said, keeping his voice low. "Who are you really?" Her violet gaze held his for a beat, longer than comfort allowed. "Names are dangerous here." She nodded toward his closed fist. "That chip will mean nothing if you hesitate. I've seen too many hopefuls end up in the refuse chute for trying," Damon said flatly. "What makes you different?" A faint smile touched her lips. Not arrogance, but recognition, as if she'd expected the challenge. "Because I've been trained for this. Because I know Mornax's kind, and I know how to make them underestimate me. And because," she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I've already mapped this facility." His jaw tightened. "You've been here less than an hour." "Observation," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Her eyes flicked to the attendants, then back to him. "We can't talk here. Too many ears." One of the attendants approached with a shallow basin of warm water. Damon stepped aside, the model of compliance, and began unlocking her wrist shackles with the magnetic key Mornax had issued him. The glyphs faded as the restraints clicked open. Her skin was warmer than he expected when his fingers brushed hers almost fever-hot, but steady. She didn't flinch from his touch. "Keep your head down," he murmured as he released the last shackle. "I know how to play the part," she replied under her breath, rolling her shoulders as if to shake off invisible chains. The door hissed, opened suddenly, and Talon's copper-scaled head appeared in the gap. The reptilian saurian stepped inside with the casual confidence of someone who had long ago learned to blend in with predators. His eyes slitted and sharp moved from Damon to the new arrival, lingering just long enough to make his meaning clear. "She's the one from Proxima," Talon said in a tone that was both statement and warning. "Mornax is already watching." "You more than usual." Damon didn't rise to the bait. "What do you want, Talon?" "Shift change," the saurian replied, then leaned in slightly. "Be careful, friend. Some acquisitions are more dangerous to keep than to lose." The door shut behind him, leaving the words hanging in the air. She tilted her head, her silver hair sliding over one shoulder. "A friend of yours?" "He's alive," Damon said, turning away to busy himself with a tray of scented oils. "In." "Here, that's close enough." When he glanced back, she was studying him with a look that was equal parts assessment and curiosity. "Then maybe," she said softly, "you understand the value of unlikely alliances." Damon didn't answer, but the chip in his pocket seemed heavier now, and the weight of Mornax's unseen eyes pressed harder against the back of his neck. And somewhere deep down, he already knew, the moment he took that chain from her in the steam-filled hall, his world had begun to shift. Damon busied himself with the small, familiar rituals of preparation, arranging bottles of oil in precise rows, checking the temperature of the rinse basin, unrolling the thin white towels that passed for luxury here. To anyone watching through a wall scanner, it would look like nothing more than a human slave dutifully readying a new acquisition for service. But he could feel her eyes on him, the quiet weight of her attention. "You didn't seem surprised." "To see me," she said finally, her voice pitched low enough not to carry to the attendants. "I stopped being surprised a long time ago," Damon replied, not looking at her. "It's easier to live that way." "Easier," she repeated, as if testing the word, "but not better." Her tone had a calm certainty that irked him. She didn't know what it was to survive here. Or maybe she did more than he wanted to admit. He met her gaze for the briefest moment, seeing again that spark of awareness, of intention, and had to look away before it unsettled him further. The insectoid attendant clicked its mandibles impatiently, gesturing for Lena to sit on the low bench. Damon gave a slight nod, and she obeyed without resistance. The other attendant began combing through her silver hair with a wide-toothed ivory brush, the light catching each strand in ripples of metal bright sheen. "You carry yourself differently." "Than the others," Damon said, arranging a tray of mineral stones within easy reach. "Like you've worn chains before and learned to ignore the weight." "Ignore?" Her lips curved faintly. "No, I learned to use them." He arched a brow. "That's an odd skill." "It's a useful one." Her eyes lifted to his, sharp now, her voice a whisper just above the sound of the brush through her hair. "Chains make people look away from what really matters. They focus on the visible restraint, not what your hands are doing." Her meaning was obvious. Damon had learned the same lesson long ago, just in a different language. His fingers brushed the pocket where the data chip rested, and the tension in the room seemed to thicken. The insectoid paused its work, chittering. A question to the avian attendant in a dialect Damon didn't understand. The two exchanged a few curt syllables before resuming their tasks, apparently unconcerned. Still, he felt the invisible wire of risk tighten between them. She bent her head toward him just enough for the words to reach his ears. "I need your help to reach the master console. That's where the collars are controlled." "And in return?" he asked. "You get your freedom," she said simply. "And maybe more, if you want it." He studied her for a moment, wondering what more meant to someone like her. But the door hissed open again, and the moment fractured. Mornax stepped inside, his tall frame filling the space, 4 eyes scanning the scene with the slow patience of a predator. "Human," he said smoothly. "How is our new acquisition?" Damon inclined his head. "She'd be ready for service by nightfall, Master." Mornax's upper right hand stroked the edge of his jaw thoughtfully. "See that she is. Lord Vex will be most interested in her, and in how she pairs with you." The implication hit Damon like a stone in the gut, but he kept his expression still. Mornax's gaze lingered on both of them, and slid away with deliberate disinterest. When the door closed behind him, Lena's voice was barely more than breath. "We don't have long." And for the first time in years, Damon realized he was already counting the hours. The hours slipped by like sand through wet fingers, each one pulling Damon closer to the kind of night that left no room for error. The air in the bathhouse thickened as evening approached, heavy with the scent of heated oils and rare blossoms imported at obscene expense. Somewhere beyond the preparation halls, musicians tuned their stringed instruments, the first notes drifting faintly through the steam-laden corridors. Damon stood in the dim side chamber where Mornax's unique displays were readied, fastening the thin sash of the garment he'd been ordered to wear. It was little more than a strip of dark fabric draped low across his hips, designed to display muscle and form rather than offer modesty. He'd worn worse before, but tonight the humiliation came sharpened by knowledge. It was all part of Mornax's design to make Lena's glow more striking in contrast. She entered moments later, escorted by 2 guards, who looked at her with the cautious awe of men handling an explosive device. Her attire was barely more than his swaths of translucent fabric the color of moonlight, woven to move like liquid over her skin. Her turquoise glow, enhanced by the luminescent oil Mornax favored, caught every ripple of movement. Even Damon, who had trained himself to look past beauty in this place, found his breath snagged for a fraction of a second. "You look," he began, then stopped, knowing there was no safe word for it here, like something to be bought and displayed. She finished for him, her voice low. She glanced at the guards, and then, with the subtlest shift of her wrist, traced 3 short patterns against her Thigh-Lumidian military code. Sequence ready. "Wait for signal." He gave the barest nod. They had reviewed the plan in whispers, and glances all afternoon. The lighting sequence, the moment of the midnight effect, her dash for Mornax's console while Damon created a distraction. If it worked, the virus embedded in her chip would unlock every collar in the building. The guards ushered them out, and down the main corridor toward the performance chamber. Mornax was already seated beside Lord Vex, the insectoid crime lord's compound eyes gleaming as he leaned forward, eager to inspect the presentation. "Ah," Vex chittered when they entered, his voice like metal clicking on stone. "A fascinating pairing indeed." "I thought you would appreciate the contrast," Mornax replied smoothly, gesturing for them to take their place on the central platform. Damon stepped forward with Lena, the polished marble underfoot slick from condensation. He could feel Mornax's gaze on him, measuring every gesture for signs of defiance, and forced his body into the loose, fluid posture of a man meant to entice. Music began, slow and sinuous, the rhythm designed to showcase the curves and movements of the performers. Damon reached for Lena as instructed, fingers brushing the curve of her jaw, and the air between them seemed to crackle. To the observers, "We're doing exactly what they expect," she murmured against his ear. To each other, "We're somewhere else entirely." He slid his palm along her arm, his thumb tapping twice near her wrist in return code. "Ready when you are." The lighting above shifted, moving through warm golds and deep blues, each cycle edging closer to the midnight effect. Mornax was watching. Yes, but so was every guard in the chamber, their attention riveted to the center of the platform. Lena's lips brushed the edge of his ear. "My people have a saying, those who share danger share destiny." He almost smiled. "We just called it falling in love at the worst possible time." The lights dimmed, plunging the room into near darkness. Her glow became the chamber's only illumination, a living beacon in the dark. "Now," he whispered. She slipped from his arms in a sudden whirl of translucent fabric, gliding toward Mornax's console at the dais. Damon went the other way, feigning a stumble that carried him into a low fountain along the platform's edge. The splash was loud, a sharp interruption that made several guards turn toward him, exactly as intended. Somewhere behind them, Damon heard the quick, precise taps of Lena's fingers on the console keys, and his pulse began to race. In seconds, either every collar in this place would open, or they'd both be dead before they saw another sunrise. The chamber filled with a sharp, rising hum, like a swarm of insects trapped inside metal walls. Damon felt it in his collar first, a heat building along the rim of the metal band. Around him, guards stiffened, clawed hands flying to their throats as the same warmth ignited under their skin. Then came the sound, a soft click, followed by the dull thud of metal hitting marble as one collar after another fell away. Shouts erupted. Freed slaves surged toward the exits, some shouting in languages Damon didn't recognize, others wielding whatever they could grab as weapons. The guards, now stripped of their control devices, were a chaotic mix. Some turned on Mornax's syndicate thugs, others simply ran. Damon's hand flew to his own collar. It was still locked, the heat now a searing band of fire around his throat. His vision narrowed for a heartbeat. Damn it, Mornax had always been paranoid, Of course, he'd install a secondary failsafe just for him. Across the chaos, Lena's glow exploded into blinding brilliance. Patterns bloomed under her skin, intricate and unmistakable royal genetic markers that no imposter could fake. The sight stunned even those in the middle of a fight. Lord Vex leaned forward, compound eyes glittering. A Lumidian crowned princess. He hissed, as if savoring the words. Mornax recoiled, 4 eyes darting between her and the riot in the chamber. Get her. He roared, but the guards loyal to him were already scattering. Damon pushed through the melee, his burning collar making. Every breath sharp. He reached Lina just as the main door slammed open. Your Highness. The voice cut through the chaos. A Lumidian Royal Guard captain, armored and flanked by a squad whose weapons hummed with charged energy. We tracked your signal. Talon peered behind them, copper scales gleaming in the glow. He hooked an arm under Damon's to steady him. The other slaves are clearing out, he shouted over the din. But your caller, Mornax, Damon ground out. He's got the remote. They're near a side exit. Mornax was backing away, remote clenched in his upper right hand, rage twisting his parchment-like features. You deceived me, he snarled at Lena. Perhaps I'll take your pet human with me instead. His finger began to depress the detonation switch. Damon didn't think. He tore free of Talon's grip, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides that ignored the collar's pain. He slammed into Mornax's midsection, driving them both into the wall. The remote clattered across the floor. Skidding toward Lena Dot, she scooped it up without hesitation, fingers flying over the controls. Green button, then 4018, Talon marked. She obeyed, and the burn at Damon's neck vanished, replaced by the sweet relief of cool air against raw skin. The collar fell away with a hollow clang. Mornax struggled under Damon's grip, all 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible. No human could move under that kind of you never. Understood humans, Damon said, voice low. We're strongest when we're protecting someone we care about. The royal guards closed in, binding Mornax's limbs. Vex, too, was caught in a stasis field, his limbs twitching. Lena was at Damon's side in an instant, her hands gentle as they examined the angry red mark around his throat. You could have been killed, she whispered. Worth it, he said, and meant it. The guards began herding the last freed slaves toward the exits. Over the din, Lena's voice carried with the authority of her title. All of them are under Lumidian protection now. Damon watched her, the brilliant glow of her skin softening as she turned back to him. In her eyes, past the relief and the exhaustion, he saw the same dangerous thing that had first stirred in him when she pressed that chip into his palm. Hope no longer dangerous. Now unstoppable. The world beyond the bathhouse smelled different, cleaner air, tinged with the ozone of freshly powered engines and the faint spice of Lumidian, incense burning on the Royal Transport's landing deck. Damon sat on the padded bench of the medical bay, his posture stiff as the holographic scan rotated above him. The angry red welt at his throat had already faded to a thin pink line after Lumidian treatment. But the medic's focus wasn't on his neck. There, said Chief Medical Officer Reynolds, tapping the scan with a 6-fingered hand. At the base of the skull. Draconian tracking nanochip advanced model, heavily integrated with neural pathways. I'm surprised our equipment detected it at all. Lena stood beside Damon, her glow dimming with concern. Can you remove it? Reynolds hesitated. Not without risking severe neurological damage. Our surgical protocols can't sever the chip's neural anchors. Only the Draconians have the extraction tech to do it safely. Damon absorbed the Chinziche. Words and silence. The cool relief of his freed collar evaporated, replaced by the lead weight of realization. So as long as it's in me, I'm a walking beacon. More than that, Reynolds said. If your location is compromised, so is Her Highness. And Haven. The medic excused himself at Lena's quiet command, leaving them alone. Damon exhaled slowly, trying to mask the frustration building in his chest. Then I can't go to Lumedia. Not with this thing in my head. I won't accept that, she said, the steel of her royal authority cutting through the softness of her tone. There must be another way. Before he could answer, the door chimed. Talon stepped in, newly polished but still carrying the wary poise of a man who'd spent too long under someone else's rule. The others have decided, he announced. They want to keep the bathhouse. Damon frowned. Keep it? Not as it was, Talon said quickly. As a sanctuary. For runaways, rescued captives, anyone the slave networks would hunt. They want to call it Haven. He looked between Damon and Lena. But for it to work, they need leadership, representation. The unspoken request was clear. Damon leaned back, the answer already forming before Callan had finished. I can't leave the sector anyway, not with this tracker. If I stay, I can help make Haven a shield for people like us. Lena's glow pulsed with emotion. And us? What happens to us? Damon met her gaze. We find a way. This isn't an ending. Talon cleared his throat. One more thing. Before they took Mornax away, he mentioned a draconian medical ship that makes regular stops in this sector, off the books. For the right price, they perform procedures the Emperor doesn't sanction. Lena's brows drew together. If they have the tech. It's risky, Talon warned, but maybe your only shot. Damon straightened, decision settling over him like armor. Find out when they're back. If I can get this chip out, I can stand beside you on Lumedia. Until then, I'll protect Haven. Lena stepped closer, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Then I'll protect you from everything else. They stood like that for a long moment, the hum of the royal ship beneath them, two people bound now by more than circumstance. What had started in steam and chains had turned into something far more dangerous, and far more worth keeping alive. 6 months changed everything. Where once the bathhouse had been a gilded cage, it now breathed with life. The marble halls no longer echoed with the clipped commands of overseers, but with the laughter of children, the clatter of tools, the low murmur of survivors telling their stories. Steam rooms had become rehabilitation chambers. Private suites were converted into classrooms, sleeping quarters, and training halls. Refugees arrived daily, led here by rumor by the whispered name Haven. At the center of it all was Damon. No longer a slave, no longer just a survivor, but a leader whose word carried weight across the sector. He wore no crown, no uniform, but the people looked to him all the same. And though the weight of responsibility was real, the heavier weight was still the unseen one, the draconian chip buried in his skull. That morning, Talon entered Damon's office, the one that used to belong to Mornax, with a data pad in hand. The draconian medical ship's in orbit, the Saurian said, his copper scales catching the light. Name's Mercy's Fang. Captain swears their surgeon, Dr. Vexel, can remove your chip without frying your brain. Damon leaned back, reading. The cost details. It would drain nearly all of Haven's emergency funds. Still, the answer was easy. Book it. Talon hesitated and slid another pad across the desk. Message came an hour ago, from her. Damon's heart thudded once, hard, as he activated the secure file. Lena's holographic image loomed into the air draped in the flowing silks of her station, but her eyes were still the same. By the time you hear this, her recorded voice said softly, I'll be en route the Proxima sector. We agreed I'd stay away until after the procedure. But she paused, her glow pulsing faintly. Some things can't be said over encrypted channels. Some things need to be said in person. Be safe, my love. I'll see you soon. When the image faded, Damon sat for a long moment, his chest tight. We could postpone, Talon offered. Wait until she's gone, so there's no risk. No. Damon rose, decision solid. The sooner this chip is gone, the sooner she's safe. We proceed. Hours later, the Mercy's fang loomed in the viewport, a predator's silhouette softened only by the docking lights guiding him in. The medical bay inside was sterile, all gleaming surfaces and precise order. Dr. Vexel, a tall, pale-scaled Draconian, greeted him with a narrow smile. The procedure is straightforward, Vexel hissed. We induce a controlled coma, deploy nanobots to sever the chip's neural anchors, and extract. Your case is delicate, but manageable. Damon, lay back on the surgical cradle. Let's get it done. The neural crown settled onto his head. Count backward from 10, Vexel instructed. He made it to 8 before the world fractured, not into darkness, but into a strange, lucid half-space. Voices drifted to him through the haze. Confirmed. It's him, Vexel said to someone. Unseen. The human agent who infiltrated the Orion slave network. The second voice was sharper. Once the chip's gone, his memories return. The Emperor will reward us, and with the princess arriving 2 prizes in 1. Memory shards flashed in Damon's mind Earth's flag, mission briefings, covert extractions. He wasn't just a cargo pilot. He was an undercover operative, chosen not only for skill, but for genetic markers hinting at latent psionic potential. Something inside him ignited. Heat spread from his core outward, the neural crown sparking as his body rejected its restraints. His eyes snapped open, burning with a light that made Vexel stumble back. With emotion he didn't fully understand, Damon wrenched the chip from the base of his skull, blood slicking his fingers. Alarms screamed. A guard burst in with a weapon raised. Damon moved without thought, disarming, striking, and dropping. The Draconian in one fluid sequence. He turned to Vexel, voice like steel. You are going to hand her over. Vexel's hands rose, trembling. The Emperor ordered, not today. Damon crossed to the console, his mind touching the controls as if the circuitry were an extension of himself. With a few keystrokes and an effort of will, he didn't fully comprehend. He locked down the ship's weapons and sent an encrypted warning to Lena. Within the hour, the Lumidian Royal Guard secured the vessel. When Lena's ship docked and she stepped through the airlock, her glow flared brighter at the sight of him whole, free, alive. She crossed the distance in a rush, throwing herself into his arms. I felt it, she breathed. That surge of energy, it was you, wasn't it? He smiled against her hair. We'll talk later. Later came in her quarters, where the hum of the engines was the only witness to their reunion. Wrapped in each other, they spoke of what his memories meant about the Emperor's designs, about the proof Damon now carried that could dismantle the slave networks. There's no precedent for this, she murmured. A human with psionics bound to. A Lumidian princess. Then we'll write it ourselves, he said. She smiled, her glow bathing them in soft turquoise light. Then we begin now, not as master and slave, not as princess and operative, as partners. And under the light of distant stars, with war yet to come, Damon knew that for the first time in years, he was exactly where he was meant to be.